The film begins with Emily, a social worker in child protection services tasked with investigating cases of domestic abuse involving children to ensure their safety. She is currently managing an overwhelming 38 active cases when her boss, Wayne, unexpectedly assigns her a 39th, which frustrates her. Nevertheless, she maintains her composure and reviews the new file, discovering a photo of a young girl named Lilith Sullivan, reported to be neglected by her parents. Later that evening, Emily meets her best friend Doug, a doctor, at a bar where he reveals his feelings for her and suggests starting a relationship. Although Emily reciprocates his feelings, she declines, citing her stressful job and lack of time for dating. The following day, she visits Lilith's home and encounters her parents, Margaret and Edward, who appear rude and suspicious. Lilith, a quiet and innocent-looking child, is also present. Emily informs the parents about a call received by her agency regarding Lilith's neglect, mentioning her isolation at school and significant drop in grades over the past few months. However, the parents deny any issues. When Emily attempts to speak with Lilith, the girl seems frightened of her parents and stays silent. Back at the office, Emily expresses her concerns to Wayne about the strange behavior of Lilith's parents. She requests that they be brought in for a meeting, but Wayne is reluctant, fearing potential legal repercussions. After Emily persists, he eventually agrees to the plan. The following day, the Sullivan family arrives at the office to meet with Wayne. To Emily's surprise, they behave normally, with Edward expressing his love for Lilith and insisting that nothing wrong is happening in their home. Later, Emily speaks with Lilith privately and asks if she's okay. Lilith reveals that her parents seem to hate her and often threaten to send her to hell. Alarmed, Emily quickly takes her to Wayne's office and asks her to repeat what she just said. However, when Lilith spots her father nearby, she becomes frightened and falls silent. After the family leaves, Emily persists in trying to convince Wayne that abuse is occurring, but he dismisses her worries and closes the case. That evening, she seeks help from her detective friend Mike, but he tells her he can't intervene without proof and encourages her to drop the matter. The next day, Emily visits Lilith after school and the girl excitedly hugs her. Emily inquires about the situation at home, but Lilith remains tight-lipped. When the school bus arrives, Emily gives her personal phone number and tells her to call if she feels scared. Later that evening, Emily receives a frantic call from Lilith, who says her parents are going to harm her. Shocked, Emily rushes to the Sullivan home and asks Mike to accompany her. They arrive to hear Lilith screaming inside. Mike forces open the front door and they rush in to find a horrifying scene. Lilith's parents are trying to put her in the oven. As Mike confronts Edward, Margaret approaches Emily with a knife. The detective bravely defends them, allowing Emily to rescue Lilith. In the aftermath, Edward and Margaret are declared mentally unstable and sent to an asylum. Meanwhile, Lilith is in the hospital, where Doug conducts her psychological evaluation. After her discharge, she is moved to a state home until a permanent family can be found. Lilith asks Emily to adopt her, promising to be a good child. Emily, however, tells her she's not cut out to be a mother and is too busy to care for a child. Undeterred, Lilith insists that Emily won't know unless she gives it a try. A few days later, Emily reconsiders and decides to take Lilith into her care until a foster home is found. After much effort, she persuades the board of directors and brings Lilith home. They start living together and seem very happy. One day, Emily returns to Lilith's former home to collect her belongings. She is shocked to find that the parents' room is locked from the inside with several bolts, and she notices scratches on the floor, suggesting the parents had barricaded themselves in at night. The scene then shifts to the hospital, where Lilith participates in a group therapy session with Doug and other children. A boy named Diego shares his struggles with bullying at school and his parents' impending divorce. Just then, Emily arrives to pick up Lilith and they head home together. The next day at the office, Emily receives the devastating news that Diego has killed both of his parents. Shocked, she rushes to the crime scene for answers, realizing she had been closely involved with his case. At the scene, she meets Mike, who informs her that Diego used an iron rod from the garage to murder his parents and was found crawling on the walls when the police arrived. This horrific event deeply unsettles Emily, but Doug reassures her, reminding her that she can't save everyone. When Emily returns home, she finds that Lilith has discovered a childhood photo of her with her mother. Lilith asks about her family, and Emily shares that she never knew her father and lost her mother in an accident when she was young. She recounts how it was pouring rain that day and only she survived. Upset that Lilith rummaged through her belongings, Emily asks her not to do it again. Later, Emily and Mike are at a diner discussing Diego's case. Emily insists that despite Diego's troubled background, he loved his parents and couldn't have committed the crime. Mike then drops a bombshell. On the night of the murder, Diego received a call from Emily's house. Shocked, Emily denies making any such call. They return to her home and question Lilith about Diego. The girl acts innocent and states that he's in the same therapy group, But when asked if she called him the night before, she confidently denies it. The next day, Emily visits Diego, who is now in a facility. When she asks about the call, Diego becomes visibly stressed and has a panic attack, collapsing to the floor. Once he regains composure, he confirms there was a call from her house, stating a man spoke on the line but refusing to share what was said. Confused, Emily realizes there's no one in her home except her and Lilith. That evening, while working late at the office, Emily sees Lilith playing nearby. Doug arrives and takes Lilith for her psychological evaluation. He begins asking her about school and friends, but she urges him to get to the point. Doug mentions that in her preliminary evaluation, Lilith claims she wasn't afraid of the dark, being alone, or her parents. When he probes into her fears, she turns the question back on him, asking about his fears instead. Doug shares a childhood experience where he was stung by a hornet, which has left him terrified of them ever since. Lilith then says she isn't scared of anything except herself and what she could do to others. Unlike her usual innocent demeanor, she appears smug and tells Doug that she doesn't like him at all, warning him to be afraid of what's to come. Later, as Doug leaves the office, he tells Emily that despite interviewing many children, he has never felt as threatened as he does now. Confused, Emily begins to sense that something is seriously wrong with Lilith. That evening, Doug is at home when his phone rings. He answers but hears strange noises on the line, prompting him to hang up. Moments later, he feels something moving in his ear. When he investigates with a cotton swab, he is horrified to see a hornet emerge. He quickly discards it, but soon more hornets start coming out of his eyes, nostrils, and mouth. Overcome with panic, he falls to the ground and fatally injures his head. The scene transitions to Doug's funeral, where Emily is visibly devastated. In contrast, Lilith seems indifferent and attempts to hold Emily's hand, but Emily, terrified, quickly pulls away. The next day, Emily watches an interview with Lilith's parents following their arrest. In the footage, Margaret claims that Lilith is not their biological child, but a demon. She explains that after Lilith was born, family members began dying mysteriously. Margaret lost 2 siblings, and Edward lost 3. They are the only survivors, and Margaret warns that Lilith won't kill them unless she finds someone else to care for her. Emily later visits the asylum to speak with Lilith's parents. Margaret appears dazed, so Emily talks to Edward. He insists that Lilith is a demon who feeds on kind-hearted individuals and shares that they attempted to kill her to end the nightmare. He reveals that the only opportunity to kill Lilith is while she sleeps, which she rarely does. He recounts that on the first night she actually slept, they tried to put her in the oven, but Emily intervened. Terrified, Emily rushes to Mike to explain the situation, but he accuses her of sounding just like Lilith's parents. He dismisses her claims, suggesting that she's merely projecting her grief over Doug's death and looking for someone to blame. Disappointed, Emily returns home and installs many locks on her bedroom door, just like the one she saw in Lilith's parents' house. She also removes all the phones from the house, so the demon cannot call anyone. Days later, Emily receives good news from her colleague that a family is willing to adopt Lilith permanently. This pleases her, and she goes to Edward to share the news. However, he doesn't think it's a good idea. He insists that if Lilith moves to another family, she will continue to kill more people and the curse will never end. Edward explains that the only way to stop the girl is to eliminate her once and for all. He also advises Emily not to fear Lilith, because if she's not scared, Lilith can't hurt her. Shortly after Emily leaves the asylum, Margaret sees a hallucination of her arm burning. This freaks her out so much that she ends up unaliving herself. Meanwhile, Edward hears Lilith's voice in another inmate and brutally attacks him in the neck with a fork. When the guards try to stop him, he falls and accidentally stabs himself in the eye with the same fork, leading to his death. The next day, Mike meets with Emily and reveals the phone conversation that Doug had before his death. In the recording, they initially hear Lilith's voice, which gradually transforms into a demon's. This finally convinces Mike that the girl is evil, so they both decide to finish her off that night. When Emily returns home, she finds photos of all the victims Lilith has killed, and among them is a picture of Mike as well. Elsewhere, Mike takes a gun from his office and heads to his car to leave. But moments later, he receives a call and hears strange noises on the other end. Just then, a dog appears out of nowhere and begins attacking him. He tries to shoot the dog, but accidentally shoots himself in the head and dies. We then notice that the dog wasn't real, but just an illusion created by Lilith. Later, upon hearing about Mike's death, Emily is heartbroken and feels utterly hopeless. In a desperate mood, she dissolves some sedatives in a cup of chamomile tea and offers it to Lilith before going to bed, just as she does every night. Once she believes the girl is asleep, she secures her bedroom door. Emily then douses her house in gasoline and sets it ablaze, hoping to take Lilith with it. As firefighters arrive, Emily watches from the street, exhausted yet relieved that the nightmare might finally be over. However, to her shock, she spots Lilith among the firefighters and neighbors who came to help. It turns out that Lilith had anticipated Emily's plan and escaped before the fire could consume her. In the next scene, an agent takes Emily and Lilith to a safe location for the night. During the drive, Lilith expresses her desire to go to a hotel with a swimming pool, but Emily chooses a different route and speeds away. Unfortunately, her plan backfires as Lilith remains unfazed. Instead, she uses her powers to force Emily to relive a traumatic childhood memory, her mother driving recklessly in the rain with Emily in the back seat. This memory overwhelms Emily with fear, but she manages to push through, convincing herself that what she's experiencing isn't real. As she does so, the vision of her mother fades, causing Lilith to become frightened for the first time as her powers wane. Determined, Emily then drives the car toward a pier and crashes it into the water. As the car begins to sink, a terrified Lilith shifts into her demonic form. Emily traps her in the trunk and fights to swim to the surface. Just as she's about to escape, the demon grips her foot, but after a fierce struggle, Emily breaks free and emerges from the water. Meanwhile, Lilith is left to drown in the sinking vehicle. The film concludes with Emily climbing onto the pier, taking a deep breath of relief as police sirens wail in the background. That's a wrap on today's movie recap. If you enjoyed the breakdown and want to see more, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you never miss an update. Let me know in the comments what movie you'd like me to cover next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.